So we're now going to move to Agendum 7, which is question time. And can I draw your attention, please, to the provisions for this, rules for question time, on the pages procedural matters, which, if it were numbered, would be pages 7 of the order book. So, rules for question time. In essence, the question will not be read again. The question will not be read. The answer will be given, and after that, the questioner may make briefly either a comment or one supplementary question only, says my briefing paper. So, are we ready, please? The first question from Moira Randall of the Diocese of Llandaff, to be answered by Dr. Heather Payne.
Thank you, Chair. Heather Payne, elected lay member, Llandaff. And I'm giving this response on behalf of the bench until a further lead bishop for science is identified. So this is about the Anglican Communion Science Commission, and it was established to promote greater understanding and theological engagement with ideas of science in order to underpin our 5 marks of mission. So it's not another thing, it is a way of working. Launched at the Lambeth Conference with all the bishops around the Anglican Communion in last August by the Archbishop of Canterbury, who said a church that refuses to or is unable to engage in these areas, my dear sisters and brothers, will have nothing to say to a world whose future is being decided by changes of science and technology. So that's the point of the Anglican Communion Science Commission. What is our commitment and what are we doing as the Church in Wales? Well, Bishop Joe was part of the Lambeth Conference, and of course her expertise and PhD thesis in quantum physics and theology, she was the ideal person to be our inaugural lead bishop for science, but sadly her illness and retirement leaves a hiatus which the bench will aim to fill once it's been fully re-established later this year. I have had the honour and privilege of being appointed as a member of the Science Commission since 2020, and I have contributed academic discussion papers on topics such as COVID pandemic and faith systems, biomedical ethics, and the need for a global cultural perspective so that it's not just Western-centric, and traditional community health beliefs and faith systems. So this has led to a research programme which is led by Dr. Jackie Bay of Auckland University, and I'm a co-investigator on that. And the Church in Wales is supporting my attendance at those meetings. Our first research workshop was in Kenya, August, just gone, a few weeks ago, with African bishops, theologians and scientists. And the research uses an appreciative inquiry methodology so that this promotes co-production of priority issues relevant to Anglican provinces, not just us, but in every part of the world. And we have to be aware of the cultural and ethnic differences and community beliefs that will inform their understanding of faith and science together. So the key questions are, how do we as Anglicans understand the theological relationships between our different knowledge systems of science, faith and culture, because they are knowledge systems addressing similar questions, really important questions of belonging, of being, of how we actually live our lives, and how can we offer practical support as a science commission, and how can that impact human flourishing in our church and in our world. The next steps are further workshops that I'm due to attend in Jamaica in November and Oceania next February. That'll be in Melbourne, but it will deal with indigenous communities from the Cook Islands, Solomon Islands, Melanesia, Polynesia, who are directly threatened by climate change. And this will lead up to Lambeth Phase 3 in July to September next year, 2024. And there will be evaluation and reporting. So in Wales, our current priority is to build on successful work such as the Eco Church that we've already talked about, and start conversations to engage with clergy, theological educators and scientists to bring together conversations and stories about where we are already using faith and science together. This stage is a listening stage, and so I'm grateful to take this opportunity to invite comments and suggestions to me as a Science Commissioner, either in person in these next couple of days or via email. My email address will be published. It's acc@churchinwales.org.uk, and we will provide updates at future governing body meetings on the Science Commission.
Thank you very much. Moira, do you want to ask a supplementary or make a comment? Could you come forward, please? And in future questions, if you're the person who's asked the question, could you come and linger at the front so that you're ready to spring up as soon as the answer has been provided?
Firstly, thank you very much for your response to my question. What I would like to ask is, what are we, the Church in Wales, actually doing towards the ECLAS project, i.e. aimed at equipping Christian leadership in an age of science? What are we actually doing for our clergy and our leaders? Thank you.
Thank you, Moira. ECLAS, as you say, Equipping Christian Leadership in an Age of Science, is based in Durham University, and it has a very important, it's actually an ecumenical fund, but it's got a fund, and it's to promote science in seminaries and science in scientists in congregations, and to encourage conferences relating to the integration of science and faith. That is one of the areas where I've already taken some steps to discuss with individuals the possibility of applying for a direct grant, and again it has to come from individuals, but it's a really important source. It is separate from the Science Commission but working in partnership, and it is a very important source of potential funding to engage with all the health professional students and science students that we have coming to Wales every year, because those are groups of the population where we could really make an impact. And again, it is not turning clergy or people into scientists. It is basically saying we bring these knowledge systems together in order to serve our 5 marks of mission: to tell, teach, tend, transform and treasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question 2 from the Reverend Lance Sharp, being answered by the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon. Bishop John, please.
So Reverend Lance's question was, as we approach the 100th anniversary, we've already approached it, we're here, in the Diocese of Swansea and Brecon. The population in Swansea itself is 316,000 people, and it still doesn't have an Anglican cathedral. Basically, why not? I went to Mr. Paul Murray to ask him about the second church, so to speak, in the diocese, the Church of St Mary's down in Swansea, and ask about the history of this, because it seems to be a perennial question. It comes up all the time. What are you doing up there? Why haven't we got a cathedral in Swansea? Why is the cathedral in Brecon? So Paul, who is great at the history of our diocese, has told us this. The bishop's throne at St Mary's in Swansea in 1888, Basil Jones, Bishop of St David's, said, if you can't take the people to the cathedral, take the cathedral to the people. Take the cathedral to the people. So he set about building a new church suitable to be a cathedral for a new diocese in Swansea and its surrounding area. And he appointed James Allen Smith as Vicar of Swansea to raise the funds necessary and oversee the building of a new St Mary's. And in 1890, the bishop appointed a suffragan bishop of Swansea by the name of John Lloyd. I don't think we want another bishop in Swansea, do we? We're bad enough with the one we've got, I think. Between 1895 and 1898, St Mary's was totally rebuilt and a bishop's throne was included. And St Mary's became the 4th largest church in the province. And St Mary's, though, as many of you know, was destroyed by fire on the 21st of February 1941 during the 3-night blitz in Swansea. And it took 18 years before it was rebuilt. And the vicar, Harry Williams, made sure that a throne for the bishop, again, was included. The point being now, whilst not a cathedral, the civic importance of St Mary's shouldn't be overlooked. There was a civic pew in St Mary's in 1558 and possibly before that, And today there's a dedicated pew for the Lord Lieutenant, pew for the Lord High Sheriff and the Lord Mayor. And it's only right and proper, writes Paul, not me, that the Bishop of Swansea and Brecon has a seat worthy of his position in the second church of the diocese. What a beautiful sentence and well crafted, thank you. As Swansea is the second city of Wales. So over the years, St Mary's has acted as host for many important and national services. When the bishop's present, there sometimes continues to function as a civic church for city and for the county, Preserved County of West Glamorgan, in conjunction with St David's Church in Neath. The point being, is mission improved, I think, by the fact that we might have a cathedral down in Swansea? I'm not sure the answer to that is yes. I think possibly the answer is no. St Mary's is a wonderful church. There's a lot going on there. I'm not sure that we'd achieve anything by having a second cathedral put down into Swansea. But you may beg to differ, Lance.
One comment, one question.
Lance Sharp, elected clergy, Swansea and Brecon. Thank you, Bishop John, for your answer. I think you made a great case, actually, to elevate St Mary's to being a cathedral in your answer.
Thank you.
I think it's a matter of opinion whether mission would be helped, but you know, all that you've said, really, its destiny should have been to be a cathedral. And I think one of the only reasons it's not is because there's a cathedral in Brecon, because of how the diocese was created 100 years ago. But I think if we could think outside the box and think about an exception to be made for the second city of Wales, Isle of Dinas Cymru, I think, you know, it is by far the second city of Wales, and perhaps the Church in Wales could think about an exception being made. Because if it is a cathedral, then more resources will go into it, and that must help its mission if more resources would go into that church. Thank you.
Thanks, Lance.
Of course, I can't possibly comment on the location of the city and cathedral of St David's.
I'm more worried about the location of the
this
bishop,
nation.
actually, because it's me who has to keep jumping up and down from Brecon to Swansea. That might be something worth looking at. But I do accept what you're saying, and I understand entirely why people are thinking in the same line as you, Lance.
Thank you very much. Question 3 comes from Ms Susan Fogarty of the Diocese of Bangor, and the answer is to be given by the Bishop of Llandaff, Bishop Mary.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be invited to answer this question. The monitoring of the representation of women began in the Church in Wales after this body sent myself and Bishop Joanna Penberthy to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. Following our report back to the governing body, the Standing Committee of the Church in Wales set up a working group in 2006 to review and make recommendations concerning the representation of women in the Church in Wales in all aspects of church life. And part of the impetus for the working group was responding to the United Nations Millennium Development Goal of achieving equal representation of women in decision-making at all levels of organisations. And the Anglican Communion took this up. The Anglican Consultative Council agreed they also wanted to strive towards gender justice in every Anglican province. The working group, chaired by Dr. Jill Todd, presented reports in 2009, 2013, 15 and 19. The initial report described the situation and recognised that further work was needed to implement change. Sometimes just hearing the statistics is enough. Just hearing about representation causes change. Sometimes we need to do things. The resulting resolutions of governing body have been shared with mission and ministry areas, with dioceses, bishops and the St Padden's Institute for study and application. And views of stakeholders have been sought. Work continues and the governing body will receive an update on the progress of women's representation in 2025 based on data currently being supplied by dioceses. Since 2019, the dioceses have been working on the recommendations of the last report, and some dioceses have set up their own groups monitoring representation of women continually. The interim data from dioceses which has been received by the Standing Committee will be published on the Church in Wales website following this meeting. Some of the data came in a little bit slowly because it's been a bit more difficult for dioceses which have only recently completed the move from ministry areas, and this will all be published as soon as it's received. We know there's a lot of work to do to implement more transparent, inclusive and fairer working at every level of the Church in Wales, in its financial and governing structures, in diocesan decision-making, and in our ministry and mission areas. We've also got some work to do in implementing best practice in gender reporting and recording. And as Ruth commented earlier, perhaps we also need to do some work about monitoring other underrepresented groups. This is really important work. A church whose core function is to proclaim a gospel of love, respect, and justice for all, must continue to work for a culture of equality and fairness of treatment for everyone. And we should expect nothing less from all our members.
Thank you. Susan.
Thank you. Susan Fogarty, Bangor Diocese. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Esgob Mary. Thank you so much for that. As a member of the Standing Committee, having seen some of these latest statistics, and I'm pleased to see there is numerical improvement in the representation of women in that interim update. But what I would really hope to see is a trend not only in numerical equality, but also in equality of authority at all levels, throughout all the different levels of the church. And I'd also like to make a request that perhaps when the report, the full report, comes out in 2025, that there is some kind of standardization on how all the data is represented. Because at the moment, the various dioceses have formulated the data in different ways. So it's not easy to compare one diocese with another. So that would be a request. Thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Diolch.
Yeah, certainly agree. All of that's important. Thank you.
Question 4. From Mrs Hannah Wilkinson of the Diocese of St David's, and the answer to be given by Mr Tim Llewellyn.
So good morning. The governing body last confirmed age limits for governing body membership in April 2016. This followed a comprehensive report from a standing committee working group which considered age limits across the whole of the Church in Wales and not only the provincial bodies. By way of background, the Church in Wales currently operates a range of age limits. These include minimum and maximum ages for some appointments, retirement ages relating to various appointments including committees and other bodies, and age restrictions for the membership of certain bodies and committees. There have been a number of reports to the governing body's standing committee on this subject in the years leading up to the 2015 report, and it also featured on agendas of other Church in Wales bodies. These have included the governing body, the Bench of Bishops, and some diocesan conferences, two of which passed resolutions in 2014 requesting a review of some or all of the Church's age limits. The book of Deuteronomy tells us that Moses was 120 years old when he died, but his eyes were not weak, nor his strength gone. I will, of course, consult the Standing Committee to ask if it considers that the time has come for a fresh review of this matter. However, I think it is unlikely that we will recommend changing upper age limits to accommodate Moses' age.
Hannah Wilkinson, lay member St David's Diocese. Now, I do agree this is a difficult issue because not only the maximum ages, but also the minimum ages can cause issues with whether people are really up to doing the job or not. And there are feelings that people may be doing things because nobody else will, or doing it because they're reluctant to let go of it, or doing it because they don't trust other people to do it, or doing it when they're no longer up to it, but feel pressurised to carry on. And therefore, in a lot of ways, an upper age limit is necessary. But at the same time, that some people outside that age limit then have feelings of exclusion, or that they're no longer of any value, or maybe even suggesting that the church might be being ageist. So I don't really see that there's a solution to it other than reconsider it, but that to make sure that the church has got policies in place that protect vulnerable people whilst valuing their contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Points well made, and I'll commit to take it back to the Standing Committee, both, as you say, at the upper and lower ends of the spectrum. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move now to the fifth question from Reverend Dr. Jonathan Wright, which is going to be answered by the Bishop of Llandaff. Can I just say, when you're speaking at the mics, if you're looking across to the other person, just beware that if you move your mouth too far away from the mic, the rest of the room might not be able to hear you. So thank you very much.
That may sometimes be an advantage. Thank you for the question, Jonathan. There are 3 parts to your question, so I'll take each in turn. Firstly, how many standing advisory council positions are allocated to the Church in Wales? Well, Church in Wales members of these councils form part of Committee A. There are 3 committees in total on these councils. And there is no set number of places per faith or denomination or non-religious philosophical conviction amongst those who make up Committee A. The makeup of Committee A varies from council to council, as by law, the diversity of various religious and non-religious belief groups within the locality should be taken into account. And even so, in the interest of the efficiency of a standing advisory council, this proportionate representation may be overridden. Most local authorities, 17 of the 22, have 1 representative from the Church in Wales. 4 local authorities have 2 representatives, while Powys, covering the largest geographical area, has 3 representatives. The second question is, how do dioceses go about filling vacancies and how many positions are currently vacant? It's up to the local authority to approach the relevant Church in Wales diocese when a vacancy arises. This request will either be handled directly by or in consultation with the Diocesan Director of Education, but there isn't any uniform procedure across our 6 dioceses. Diocesan Directors of Education and members of the Diocesan Education teams all sit on these standing advisory councils, those which fall within their geographical area, and also our Provincial Director of Education sits on a local authority standing advisory council. In addition, dioceses nominate individuals to represent the Church in Wales on these standing advisory councils. However, how these nominations are chosen varies a little from diocese to diocese, so it's determined at a local level. Currently, there are 2 vacancies across these councils. And the third part of Jonathan's question is what provincial training and coordination is provided to ensure the Church in Wales representatives support our communities in the best way possible. Well, there are a possible 28 Church in Wales representatives on these councils. 16 of those positions are held by DDEs, members of the education team, or children and young family team, while a further representative has significant experience of this work, having been chair of the Welsh Association of Standing Advisory Councils for several years. So all of these people already have a thorough understanding of the role and work of these standing advisory councils, as well as the current educational landscape in Wales. The Church in Wales guidance for religion, values and ethics is readily available on our website. While it outlines how religion, values and ethics should be delivered in Church in Wales schools, it also has regard for the national guidance for religion, values and ethics. It also includes exemplar approaches to delivery, and we're aware that several of the Standing Advisory Council advisors recommend this site to all schools in their area. There is no specific additional training existing for these Church in Wales members of standing advisory councils who are not directly linked to diocesan teams. However, Elizabeth Thomas, our Provincial Director of Education, is more than happy to facilitate this if it's required, or to answer individual queries as they arise.
Thank you. Question 6 is from Mrs. Catherine Booker of the Diocese of Monmouth, and the answer is going to be given by the Bishop of Monmouth. Thank you, Bishop Cherry.
Thank you, Catherine, for your question, which is an important one. God asks much of all of us as we respond to his call on our lives, and the Bench of Bishops is very mindful of all the work that so many lay people and volunteers carry out with faithfulness and dedication in the local churches and communities of our province. We are all, laity, clergy and bishops, part of the same church, and we're conscious that more is being asked of us at every level. Looking at the church as an organisation, there has never been a time in history when everything neatly lined up in the way we might have wanted it to. But we do acknowledge the perception of ever more rules and regulations that we have to fulfill in the everyday life of today's local church, and that this can feel very onerous, particularly to those who have faithfully served for many years. There is much that remains to be done, not least in the diocese where the move towards ministry and mission areas is still very recent. You will be aware yourself that in the Diocese of Monmouth, the last of our ministry areas were formed and commissioned only 6 months ago. Ministry areas are still getting to grips with the new governance and finance arrangements, as well as developing a renewed vision for their life and mission together. It's early days. One of the key benefits of ministry areas is the principle of teamwork. Clergy and congregations no longer working on their own, but in partnership as members of the body of Christ, sharing the resources God has blessed us with, and supporting and encouraging one another across a wider area. If we can get this working well, it will help. Our diocesan and provincial staff are a great resource, particularly with the more specialised areas of work. They're always helpful and are happy to be contacted. Many of the provincial staff are here if you want to chat about how they can help and support ministry areas. As has been mentioned more than once already today, in terms of ongoing learning and sharing our experience, a helpful initiative that the Bench is arranging is the Diocesan Learning Community. This is a gathering in October where about half a dozen representatives from all the dioceses will meet with the bishops and learn from each other via a series of presentations focusing on specific areas, including working in a rural context, urban context, in cathedrals, and in church planting. The idea is that in prayerful conversation, we learn together, share good practice and ideas, and discern ways ahead from what has not worked out so well as what has. There's no easy answer to your question, Catherine. We are aware that the challenges are great, but so do we believe that are the opportunities. Each of us responds to God's call as best we can and trust him to guide and strengthen us for the work that he would have us do in our time. Working collaboratively, sharing resources and ideas, and supporting each other in prayer and action are things all of us can do. I'm going to finish with St. David's final words. Whilst they don't say all that there is to say about the life of the church, they are nevertheless as relevant and important for us today as they were in his day, and may answer what lies at the heart of your question. Be joyful, keep the faith, and do the little things.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Cherry. And thank you also for a positive and forward-looking and realistic reply. I brought this question here today after speaking to many people who are volunteering within our church. They don't sit here, but they are out there working. And also I have spoken to many people here, so that was my background for asking the question. We all know what volunteers face within the church. But since COVID, there has been up to a 50% reduction in volunteering. That's not just the church, that's in other organisations. If I wear another hat of mine, I am desperately looking for a Girl Guide leader. I have a group of girls who want to do guides, but I can't find a leader. So it is across the board, and we must be mindful of the value of volunteers. It is no good to be told, oh, well, the church is not all the building. Unfortunately, when you sit there and you're looking at the new damp patch, or you know that tombstones need doweling, churches need to be open. How do you do it if you haven't got a lockable vestry? And next door is a local drug dealing place. These things go on and on, I don't have to tell you. But one of the reasons, Archbishop, while possibly churches have not taken up the eco-church, they would want to, but there aren't the volunteers to do it. And to finish on a more amusing note, a great friend of mine, who is a sub-warden in a very small rural church, recently, for a funeral, was asked, first of all, where is the photocopier? Because the 3 members of the choir had forgotten their music. Where was the loo? And where was the transport to the creme after the service? So you get hit, as you all know, by all sorts of things. But thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Catherine. And your question is an important reminder to us of the challenges that you and many, many others face in the local church. I think we do have to remain realistic. I think that's one of the things that your question reminds me of. But we also have to remain hopeful, and we have to remain trusting in God's providence. And I know, and you will know from your own experience, that there are people in the diocese, the archdeacons, particularly the diocesan office staff, who are all too ready to help and support and to come and just listen to how it is and encourage you on the way. You're not alone. We're all facing the challenges, but thank you for your question. It's an important one for us to attend to.
Thank you very much. And can I say thank you to all the questioners and all those who've responded and all those who sit behind and do the work that's been referred to, and encourage conversations to continue through the rest of our governing body meeting. We have an hour to work through agenda items 8, 9 and 10. So what I propose is that we should have a maximum of 20 minutes for each. This means that when we come to questions or responses on agenda items 8 and 9, you can come and linger at this table, and we will take you in the order of first come, first served, and I will do a cut-off when we get to the 20 minutes. So first, please, the Bench of Bishops report. I draw the ad Maincar Esgobion, agendum item 8, and this is going to be introduced, I believe, by Bishop Cherry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Cherry, Bishop of Monmouth. It's my pleasure to speak to the Bench of Bishops report, which I trust you have had the opportunity to read and digest. The bench has settled into what we believe to be a good pattern of meetings, which, as the report indicates, is made up of day-long business meetings and 3-day residentials, when, as well as business, we have time to meet together as sisters and brothers in Christ, to pray and study the scriptures together, and to support and share with one another in the ministries to which God has called us. Whilst this means more meetings for us, it is time well invested. There are a couple of items in the report that relate to ministry and our work with the Director of Ministry Development, Tristan Hughes, and St Padans Institute. 2 areas of Tristan's current work are highlighted in the report. One is around the discernment process and possible refinements to the framework and criteria for discerning candidates for both ordained and lay ministries. The bench is keen that we encourage a broadening range of vocations and ministries within the church, and to have a discernment process that is fair and accessible to all. The second is around training and ongoing formation for those in positions of senior leadership in the church. As you will have read, this is in its early stages, but will include an MDR process for bishops. A positive and productive meeting was held with the principal of St Padans and later his senior leadership team to discuss the development of a 5-year strategic plan. This was agreed and endorsed in July and is shaping the direction and work of the Institute to meet the ministry needs of the church of tomorrow as well as today. Important work around the theological principles that need to underpin best practice in relation to spiritual authority was presented by Ainsley Griffiths and discussed at length. We're mindful that the line between spiritual authority and spiritual abuse can be a fine one, and that the church therefore needs as much clarity and guidance as possible in order to be able to address these issues appropriately. The fruits of the conversations between the Standing Liturgical Advisory Commission, the Evangelism, Church Growth and Pioneer Network, and staff at St Padans are exciting and will inform and shape forthcoming roadshows that will explore liturgy with a missional perspective. We also look forward to the publication of Daily with God, a daily prayer manual that the bench has approved, which we hope will be well used and serve to enrich the prayer life of Church in Wales members and others besides. The other main areas of note are referred to in the bullet points, 2 of which you have papers on and are going to be considered and debated this afternoon. We're grateful to those who come to our meetings and spend time sharing with us their work, and to all our officers and staff for the high quality of work that they produce on behalf of the Church in Wales. This concludes my summary of the report. I'm happy to take questions on the report, which I or others will answer as best we can.
Thank you, Bishop Cherry. So if you'd like to come and respond, please come forward. And a reminder that questions should be confined to the specific contents of the report, not the life and work and ministry and mission of bishops more generally. So, Going once, going twice. Aha!
There I was, hoping I'd be left off the hook.
The guillotine was poised. Yeah, but I appreciate that because it's always hard to be the first person.
Tony Mullins, Llandaff Lay. Thank you, Bishop Cherry. If I may just quote this line or paragraph from the Psalm. One thing I ask of the Lord, that will I seek after to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. My question to the bench of bishops will be around the fabric, the faith, under the faith heading, my particular spiritual experience and that of clergy that I have spoken to. I joined the choir in St Michael's in 1970 as a bass just to help out the section. And here we are, 53 years later, something caught me, and I am a convinced Anglican. Now, as far as the church is concerned, we work as volunteers, as members of the church, but I am increasingly finding it so frustrating to actually go to a service, find one thing that will speak to me and answer a problem I may have. It could be a psalm, it could be the sermon, it could be a hymn, it could be anything. And certainly, on occasions, mostly the prayers. But I'm finding then the service is over, I'm filled with spirituality and recharged to go out into the community and do my bit. Only to find that before I leave the church, there's a leak in the U-bend in the ladies. We need to get the apple catcher in to clean that drain. There's lots of pressure on laity. And my question to you as bench of bishops is for an honest, transparent answer. We are laden down and hampered by Victorian buildings which are in total need of money being thrown at it, and at the moment it's like throwing your cash at a greased board. It's not sticking and it's not achieving much. We have 5 churches in our ministry area, and we've already closed one because of the attendance and the lack of attendance in certain other churches. We are going to face the elephant in the room. We're going to have to look realistically at what we can do. Now, as part of your responsibility as a bench of bishops to look at the overall picture in Wales, is it your fear or your hope or your faith in God that we are going to have to address buildings, and that then will help us actually regain a spirituality instead of a fabric concern, a worry and anxiety, which actually weighs down your faith and your experience and your love for God, because I'm increasingly finding that when I leave church, I've got a concern, and it's not an answer from God, it's a concern of the physical, spirit, and the actual fabric of the place within their worship. So is there a long-term plan to look realistically at buildings and being honest with the congregations that worship there? I know it's going to be a difficult position for lots of people to accept that their place of worship may be threatened, but we are looking at churches now with an average attendance of 12 people, and we are entering into another winter. So that's my big concern for the church going forward, and I thank you for allowing me the time to address it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are, of course, very aware of the burdens that church buildings can place on their congregations, and there is work being done. There are some of the provincial office staff are involved in looking at the issue. We've obviously got to balance between what we need, have a realistic look at what we need and what we can let go of. Church buildings are important in terms of being symbols of God's presence in a community, and congregations very often are very close to their buildings and very committed to their buildings. So it's not an easy issue to address, but I can assure you that we're very mindful of the challenge and that work is being done between the bench and the officers at Callahan Square to see how best we can address and ease the burdens as best we can on the congregations that are looking after much loved but very costly buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Cherry. Yes, I'm not seeing anybody else who's come forward to ask a question. So I think that we will draw Agendum 8 to a close at that point. And so now we move to Agendum 9, the report of the representative body, Adroddiad Corff y Cynrychiolwyr. And so this is being presented by the Professor Medwyn Artaxerxes Hughes. Thank you, Professor Medwyn.
Your Grace, Bench of Bishops, Chair, members of the governing body, Medwyn Hughes, ex officio, member and chair of the representative body. It's my privilege to present you the report for 2022. You have in front of you the annual report. You also have the accounts that end for 31st December, and also the annual report of the Common Investment Fund. Those have been included, and also the minutes of the various meetings. 2022 was a significant year in the context of the Church in Wales, in the context of a very clear decision taken by the Church, by the representative body, by the Bench of Bishops and the Standing Committee, to invest in the future, to take a bold decision to secure that the assets facilitate God's kingdom in Wales. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But 2022 was also a year that certainly saw some very difficult issues within the volatility of financial markets across the world. And the implications of that, of course, for the Church in Wales was significant in the context of stewardship of our assets. 2022 was the year in the context of the census, where 14% showed a decline of individuals that identified themselves as Christians in Wales. There never was more of a time to secure that we did invest to make sure that we built resilience for churches in Wales. But at the heart of that also means stewardship of our assets and a detailed engagement of our assets. And the report that you have in front of you clearly articulates during this year that we did see almost 100 million reduction in the context of assets of the Church in Wales. A very volatile period, a period of significant scrutiny, and a period where the trustees had regard through good stewardship and good advice to seeking a very close eye on how we looked after the funding and assets of the Church. Now, you have the full report in front of you. I won't go through all of the details, but it would be remiss of me, out of respect to the governing body, not to refer to one or two key areas within the report. You will see that the general funds, over 95% of the income is generated through our investments. And the resulting loss of the investments on the markets made it extremely difficult in a volatile period to plan and to secure that appropriate processes were in place. We did see expenditure decrease by 2.8. There was some increase in income of 1.9. But at the end of the year, the total assets of the Church in Wales stood at 971 million. Now, if you take out of that the clergy pension scheme, the representative total funds based was 830 million pounds. And of that, 475 million pounds was set as the general funds reserve. It is out of that, of course, that we invest in the current infrastructure of the Church in Wales, and we also invest for the future of the Church. The income generated by these investments was around 20 million, even in this difficult year. And as I've noted already, this is how we support the diocese, St. Padans Institute, and also engage in other key areas of investment for the Church. At the heart of this engagement is supporting the ministry, supporting dioceses. If we don't do that, why is the representative body there at all? On so many occasions I've said the representative body is not a planning agent. We are there to serve. We are there to listen and to work upon the clear strategies of the diocese, the standing committee, and secure that there is sufficient money to take forward some exciting plans, as we heard from the Archbishop earlier today. I can report in 2022 the partnership funding was set at 2.6 million, and an additional 1.6 million was provided to the diocese from the newly formed Structural Resilience Fund. Overall, the representative body met over 30% of the total expenditure of the Church in Wales. I've reported back to other meetings of the General Body of the Clergy Remuneration Review. This seems to be taking a very long time, but it is important that we do take appropriate time to look after our clergy. And as I've reported, we have commissioned a series of legal opinions by specialists on pensions, and also we've commissioned a senior actuary, and we are now working on those opinions, and hopefully we'll be taking this forward over the next couple of months. I want to refer also to the risk strategy and the risk policy of the RB, and to make the point that the risk strategy of the representative body is completely different to the risk strategy and risk register of the Church in Wales. Our stewardship as trustees is to make sure that the funding, that the cash that is available is there for you to invest, to secure new opportunities, but to do that in a measured approach. The 2020 risk register identified 4 key areas, and again I note those for clarification. The poor total returns on our investment. I've already noted how we dealt with that. The problems within dioceses, be that linked to financial positions, and how we prepare, should we need to offer support and resilience. Thirdly, the decline in church attendance, and how do we again need to make sure that appropriate funding is made available. And then the last on the risk register, as a final 4th point, the organisational structure of the Church in Wales, and the need to simplify that. And I'm sure that we will consider that later in our deliberations. 2022 was an exciting year in setting a direction. 2022 from the financial markets was terrible. But in the context of difficult decisions, we took some very important decisions to invest in the future in the name of Christ. And in saying that statement, we invest in the Church in Wales. I therefore present the annual report and accounts to the governing body, and I ask at the appropriate time that the report be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. The seconder, Mrs. Hilary Wiseman. Formally, thank you very much. So now for debate, please. And again, can I ask people to come forward so I know how many more I've got to juggle with in the time available? Thank you.
Peter Ratcliffe, St David's elected. I'd like to thank Medwin Artaxerxes for his report, and also for the valuable help the RB give to diocese. There's a couple of questions that leapt out to me from the report. That our church buildings are valued now at nil, at nothing. That reduces the assets of the RB by £74 million. Does this figure include the land on which the church buildings are built? And is this actually realistic? It surprises me that our church buildings are valued at nothing. And also on the clergy remuneration review, I've been asking questions about this for the last 6 years, I think. It seems very, very slow. And will it be put before GB soon to be approved or not?
Thank you. No, I think we save it to the end. So if I have the speakers in the debate, then there is the right of the reply, and then we will come to the vote to receive the report or not.
Caroline Woolard, elected lay, Monmouth. I want to ask a question about something which appears on page 15 of the annual report, the Human Resources Committee, which says the Human Resources Committee is responsible for developing policies and procedures for clergy, staff and volunteers in line with good practice and the specific legislation that applies to each group. We've heard quite a lot about volunteers today, and any help that we can get with procedures and policies would be great. So pardon my ignorance, but what policies and procedures for volunteers have been developed, and where would I find them? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to contribute to the debate? Thank you very much. So, Professor Hughes, if you would like to exercise your right of reply.
Thank you, Peter. With regard to the property technical question, I'll ask Simon perhaps to address that particular issue. The clergy review, I do appreciate that it has taken a long time, but as I've noted before, the legal implications of getting this wrong would be terrible. And we need to make sure that we have the appropriate opinion. Officers have worked extremely hard in facilitating that. And I'm confident that we do have a measured opinion which we can work on. And that is why we are engaging with regulators on this particular issue. I can't promise you that this will be finalized by the next governing body. But what I do give you a commitment is that as we work through this, it'll be a very measured approach with a single objective to look after the clergy within the Church in Wales. The context of HR, of volunteering, I can report that the subcommittee has been working hard to develop a range of procedures and policies. I believe that those are being worked up at the moment, and when they are ready, we will make sure that they are available on the website. I'll ask colleagues just to answer the first technical point, if I may.
Valuation of property is always very difficult because if you look at something like a cathedral, what do you value it at? Is it worth millions and millions of pounds, or is it worth practically nothing because you've got no intention of selling it? There are some changes of regulations at the moment about how you value property in annual accounts, and it has cost the RB quite a lot of money to work out exactly what the Parsonage House estate is worth, and we had to do some negotiation to stop it costing us any more. Valuing something in the books at nothing doesn't mean it's worthless. It means that you don't have a fight with the accountants about what it's worth. So if you write the church buildings off to zero, we've no intention of selling the vast majority of them, but when you do sell them, you sell them at fair market value. So it's an accountancy trick, and the only reason for inflating a balance sheet is if you think you're going to be subject to a hostile takeover. I've no knowledge of a hostile takeover of the Church in Wales just at the moment.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure there's a theological position of the dark art of accountancy that we won't go there. With your permission, Chair, I therefore present the report to the governing body, and I ask you that the report be moved and approved.
Thank you. So we now move to the vote. So I will be asking you to wave your cards. Firstly, those for. Secondly, those against. And thirdly, abstentions. So all those in favour that the report of the representative body be approved. All those in favour? Thank you. All those against? I see none. All those abstaining? One. Thank you very much. The motion is definitively passed. Thank you, everybody. It's a great joy to have with us now, as we move to Addendum 10, Professor Elwyn Evans KC, who is the new Vice-Chancellor of the University of Wales, Trinity St David. And I'm going to ask the Archbishop, please, to come forth and make an introduction.
Chair, members of governing body, Andrew, Archbishop of Wales, it's an enormous privilege for me to be able to introduce the new Vice-Chancellor, who will of course succeed Professor Medwyn Hughes, who now assumes his role as full-time chair of the representative body. We ought to acknowledge the contribution, firstly, that our new chair has made to public life in Wales, which has been enormous. He has been in post for 23 years, and in that time has managed enormous changes within the University of Trinity St. David's. And now that we are able to receive him more fully, the expertise and the skill with which he has guided that institution will be something that he is able to bring and lay at the feet of the Church in Wales. However, the main purpose of this introduction is, of course, to introduce the new Vice-Chancellor. Previously, Pro-Vice-Chancellor and Executive Dean for the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Swansea University, having responsibility for the Welsh language and culture within that university. Professor Evans will be the first female leader of the universities and of predecessor institutions. She has a distinguished career as a barrister within law, graduating from Girton College, Cambridge, with a double first. On graduating, she attended the Inns of Court School of Law and was called to the bar by Gray's Inn in 1980. Within her work, her legal work primarily, she has had some extremely high-profile cases. This had passed me by. I'd forgotten that Professor Evans was the lead barrister for a case that continues to have reverberations within the Diocese of Bangor. People will remember with a heavy heart the April Jones case, and it was Professor Evans who was the lead barrister in that. She also took a significant role in the defence team of the Galician mine disaster. She sits as a Crown Court recorder, having been appointed in 2001. The list of her achievements could go on. They are significant and substantial. It is therefore very much an enormous delight and privilege for the University of Wales Trinity St. David to be able to receive her now as the new Vice-Chancellor of that institution, and my privilege to welcome her into the governing body of the Church in Wales as she presents her report to us.
Diolch o galon I chi am yr cyflwyniad. I suspect that my mother and father, chapel through and through, would regard my achievement of standing here before you in your corff llywodraethol yr Eglwys yng Nghymru as probably my greatest achievement. So thank you very, very much. It's a pleasure, mae'n bleser ac mae'n fraint I fod yma. Several very kind colleagues this morning have said to me that they're looking forward to my speech. I am sorry to disappoint them, although I suspect the rest of you will be very relieved to know that I'm not intending to make a speech. Those of you who know me from the court venue, Andrew Kaiser, I saw earlier, will know that I am capable of going on a bit, but I'm actually a little more concerned at the wrath from your chair if I prolong this session longer than is strictly necessary. And so, if I may, can I share 2 points? Again, forgive me, if I was in chapel it would be 3, wouldn't it? But in the spirit of curtailing the session, I'll go for 2. And the first of those is to commend to you the annual report. You have it in your bundle of documents. It illustrates the university of Wales Trinity St David's absolute commitment to its Christian tradition and also its relationship with you, the Church in Wales. The hostile takeover I thought of was possibly the Church in England, but possibly they've got their hands full so long after disestablishment. And so I would just like to reinforce the importance of that tradition and that commitment to us. From its roots over 200 years ago, and you will all have seen those signs throughout Wales confirming our 200th anniversary last year. But from its roots 200 years ago in St David's College in Lampeter through to its mission involved closely with the work of St Padans, with so much else. I'm not going to read the report, I'm not going to summarise the report, it's there, and it gives the flavour of that degree of commitment and engagement. But not just words on paper. Very important that you feel that we are open to conversation, commitment and engagement. And indeed, yesterday, it was a particular privilege, and it's my first week in the job, so it's some indication, I think, of the importance and priority that we, as a university, attach to this relationship. But yesterday, it was, as I say, an enormous pleasure to meet with Archdeacon Mones Farah, and thank you very much for your time. A former chaplain himself in Lampeter, and we were discussing chaplaincy arrangements for the university in Carmarthen and in Lampeter. So much of what you have been hearing and discussing today plays out in reality in our day-to-day engagement with your community and the communities whom you engage with and represent. And indeed also it's a great pleasure, Sam, over there, our chaplain in Swansea, to be hearing about the work he was doing yesterday with students in Swansea. It's very real. So it's words on paper and it's an indication of what we're doing, but we are also, I hope, living the experience and the opportunities that our relationship with you provides to our community, our students, our staff, and more broadly in the world that we live in. So message one, report committed to that. Message two, if I may, you'll see that the report is in the name of my predecessor, Professor Medwyn Hughes. I greeted him this morning, Vice-Chancellor, I said. He will always be, I think, Vice-Chancellor to me. I suspect he will always be Vice-Chancellor to most of you as well. I won't be offended. And I, too, would like to reiterate the enormous debt that, of course, the university owes to Medwyn, but also how committed he has been to ensuring that the relationship between university and church continues in a powerful and meaningful way. So it's not just on paper, it's the lived reality. Diolch Medwyn.
So Professor Elwyn, as she said, has been in the job for a whole week. So we let her... No, not indeed. The day. So we let her off very lightly. There is no provision in the agenda for being pinned to the wall with questions. I enjoy questions. That's cheating. So let me just say... the Professor Elwyn will be with us over lunch. There's a chance to catch up with her then. I can also say that the annual report refers to the links between the Church in Wales and the university, in particular participation in a partnership agreement with St Padans Institute to work together providing training and education for the Church's ministry. We have that. And of course, it also records that Mr Tim Llewellyn, Chair of the Standing Committee, is now a member of the Council of the University. So I was asked to draw those to your attention. So, lucky us, we can go to lunch early and return for 2 o'clock, please, when Archdeacon Paul Magnus will be in the chair. So, diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you very much to all of you for helping us get through the business so smoothly this morning.